All right, good morning, everybody. Hope everybody had a good Labor Day weekend. This is our Hurricane Community Forum. My name is Erik Heden. I'm a warning coordination meteorologist with the Weather Service office down in Morehead City. Mr. Swindell is the Emergency Management Coordinator with Washington County. We really appreciate Washington County joining us this morning for this virtual forum. I'm going to go over a quick slide on logistics. Then Mr. Swindell is going to go over some stuff for Washington County. And then we'll go back to me and I'll do a hurricane presentation. We usually do these presentations in person. We really look forward to seeing you in the community again. We'll get there someday. In the meantime, we're doing this virtual format. You're going to hear from Lance, you're going to hear from myself, you're going to hear a hurricane presentation, but we really want you asking questions. So just sit back, listen to the presentation. Your microphones have been muted, so you don't have to worry about background noise or anything like that. At any point during the presentation, you can ask a question. It might look like this if you're watching on a personal computer. If you're watching on a mobile device, you can either swipe left or right to see us full screen or just a presentation, but you can ask questions that way as well. At the very end, Mr. Lance and I will go through all of the questions. And if you want to ask a verbal question, just raise your hand. I'll call on you. I'll unmute your mic, and you can go ahead and ask a verbal question. So for now, just sit back. Mr. Lance is going to show you a couple websites. We're going to talk about Washington County. Then we're going to go over our hurricane presentation. And then again, we're going to turn it over to you for questions. So Mr. Swindell, it is all yours. I'll hop out of my presentation and I'll show the websites that you wanted up there.
Okay. Well, thank you everybody for joining in, getting on the forum webinar. We've gotten pretty used to doing it this way, and glad that those of you that could join in are joining in. Erik's going to go over some, hurricane outlook, weather-related things, and preparedness. On the county side, is ongoing and it's ever changing. But one of the websites I wanted to put up here was our county webpage. The county webpage has some bulleted points, and the most important bulleted point for me at this point is my emergency plan. I started March the 16th, just amidst COVID-19 and everything else that came to follow. So studying this emergency plan and knowing where we stand and what I need to do and what I need to let everybody know about weather and everything else that's going on is detailed in the emergency plan. So if anybody ever wants to take some time to look over that, it guides you through how to get into it, and it's a really valuable plan, and we have to operate by it 365 days a year. That was one thing that I wanted to show, and then another thing, if nobody has, I know a lot of people are registered, but our HyperReach system is another thing that we have out there for emergency notification. It's an emergency notification system. It's a very valuable system, and we have to pay for it every year, so we use it as whenever we see fit. And we also share it with some other counties, but it is in place for us to use. And if you just go on this HyperReach link, HyperReach website here, and select the city, put your address in, your number, you can put a landline on it, or you can put a cell phone. A lot of people choose to put their cell phone on it now because it's on their side or in their pocketbook, in their pocket. So HyperReach sends out, or we send out through HyperReach, any kind of details on, voluntary or mandatory evacuations if that were to come into play. Any pertinent shelter information as far as storm shelters go. So, and any other thing, there's other entities around that utilize HyperReach for emergency, quick, getting a message out and getting an alert out, whether it's a community alert or weather alert. And just thank everybody for joining in. I'm a new emergency manager. Please bear with me. I aim to please and do the best I can. And thank you for being on with us today.
All right, Mr. Lance, well, thank you very much. And just as a follow-up for everyone, those links that Lance sent me, we'll include in a follow-up email after the class. So if everything goes well with the recording, we're going to post this to YouTube. So please share this with friends, families, and neighbors. I know it's a Monday to Friday. Perhaps some folks are working, so they can look back at the recording. In that email, we'll have all these links that he spoke about and the ones I'm getting ready to talk about. So Mr. Lance, I really appreciate that. Again, just hang on for the very end for the Q&A part, but you can turn your mic and camera off if you want at this point. So now we're going to go for about the next 25 minutes. We're going to give a hurricane presentation, and then again, Mr. Lance and myself will be on at the end for any Q&A for questions on that. So this is our hurricane awareness presentation. A lot of focus of this presentation is going to be on water. Unfortunately, that is still the biggest killer with any tropical cyclone, and we're going to go over some myths of why you shouldn't focus on just a category of the storm, and really emphasize that there's many impacts that can occur with a tropical cyclone, not just wind. The time to prepare for hurricanes is now. You might say, well, Eric, of course it is. It's September. If you saw this presentation from me in March, April, May, June, July, I would be saying the same thing. Hurricane season officially runs from June 1st until the end of November, but here in Eastern North Carolina, we can get storms as early as May. We saw that the middle of this past May with Tropical Storm Arthur. And then this graphic shows that the traditional peak, where the orange and redder shadings indicate the frequency of hurricanes and tropical storms, usually peaks about the middle of September. And we've seen that with Dorian and Florence. So again, we're still around the peak of the hurricane season, but we can't let our guard down. Just like we can get storms early in the season, we've seen with Matthew and Sandy that storms can continue through the month of October, even into November on some years. So please don't think it's too late. Please don't think we're just talking about hurricane preparedness now because it's September. Really, if you live in our area, anytime after May 1st, you should start making your preparations for hurricanes. If you're new to the area, a really good website is something that we made brand new this year, weather.gov/moreheadcity. Weather.gov/moreheadcity. That will get you to our local page. And again, you can write this information down, but we'll send you these links in a follow-up email later today. If you add /hurricaneprep, we have a lot of great information on here. Everything from your disaster kit, what should you have in it? Insurance plans, how can you tidy up things around your house? What should you have in your disaster kit? If you're going to evacuate, what are some things you should know about? Did you realize that this year there's a campaign with the North Carolina Emergency Management called Know Your Zone? Are you in an evacuation zone? Are you in a more vulnerable location? All of that information is on our website, weather.gov/moreheadcity/hurricaneprep. And again, if you've got any questions on that website, we'll certainly go over those at the end of today. We do send weather briefings to our core partners. A very similar version of these briefings are on our website. Again, weather.gov/moreheadcity. This is what the website looks like, a map, some headlines toward the top. But if you scroll to the bottom section where all these icons are, there's one that's called Weather Hazard Briefing. If you click on that, you'll get a link to a briefing if there's severe weather, winter storms, tornado outbreak, hurricanes. So if you go on a day that's quiet, there's not going to be anything there. But if you go when it's busy, you'll see a PDF briefing on the upcoming weather. Another way we try to get out information is social media. We're on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. We really use that to cut through the noise and say, this is what you need to focus in on. If you remember, if you've lived here for a while, just 2 years ago, we had Hurricane Florence. It was a Category 4 storm. That number in category lowered because the wind speed decreased, but our threat had not changed, especially with regards to storm surge or heavy rainfall. And you can see this tweet before Florence. We were talking to people in the community to not let the guard down, that we still expected catastrophic impacts due to flooding. The example on the right is YouTube. While we pretty much tweet and do a Facebook post a couple times a day, YouTube is special. We only put certain things on there. Spotter training, video briefings, like we just mentioned. We do those to our core partners. We'll record that and put that online. This presentation, that will be on YouTube. So YouTube is for more of the special video type of things, and we certainly put that information there as needed. So that was a little bit about us as a weather service. Weather.gov is our website. Weather.gov/moreheadcity will bring you to the local site. This is probably one of my favorite slides. The one on the left you're probably familiar with, minus the spaghetti on it. I'm certainly a big fan of spaghetti, but you're probably familiar with this graphic if you've watched local television or if you follow storms. This is called a spaghetti model plot. We'll get into that in a second. But I want you to focus on these folks down here, the men and women of the National Hurricane Center, 175 years of experience. A lot of experience, very, very good at hurricane forecasting. So while it may be fun to look at models like this, and I've seen all the Facebook posts, I've seen the YouTube pages that have said that we should be on high alert for the last 3 weeks and nothing's happened. We should always be on alert during hurricane season, especially as we get toward September. But what you need to focus in on are the official forecasts from the Hurricane Center. Those men and women down there look at all of the models. Sometimes I get a question, is the European the most favored model or the GFS? Our most favored model is the one that we think is going to be right. And usually the one that's going to be right is called a consensus. It's taking all those models and going with an average of what could happen. With Hurricane Laura a couple weeks ago, the average error over 90 hours out was less than a couple miles. Less than a couple miles. So again, the men and women down at the Hurricane Center do an excellent job. These float around on the internet. They have some utility when the lines are close together. That means higher confidence. When they're spread out, it means lower confidence. But aside from that, again, try to really focus in on the official forecast from the Hurricane Center. They tend to be the most accurate. So you might say, well, I'm with the government and with the Weather Service. Of course, I'm going to say that. Well, I like to back things up with facts. If you've been around for a little while, our benchmark with flooding in eastern North Carolina for a lot of us, especially before Matthew and Florence, was Hurricane Floyd. So how far have we come since then? This graphic shows the average error at day 3. So the storm is 3 days out. Back in 1999, based on our average error, we would say that the center of the storm would make landfall somewhere or anywhere from eastern Georgia, anywhere across South Carolina, North Carolina, or even Southeast Virginia, a real wide area. And Mr. Swindell and an emergency manager, how can they make evacuations and things based on something that wide ranging? Very, very difficult. Now we flip forward to last year with Hurricane Dorian, average 3-day error, the landfall would be somewhere over the Cape Fear region of North Carolina. So again, much improved with track forecasting. We've come a long way with that. We're really good at track forecasting. You probably saw it with the Florence and the Dorians. But I do want to warn you about one thing that we still struggle with a little bit, and it can be a challenge. It tends to be more of a challenge as you get a little bit farther south into the Gulf of Mexico. Have a lot of more opportunities for warm water and rapid strengthening. But this is a graphic I want you to pay attention to. Our 3 most powerful storms in the nation before landfall were tropical storms. The Labor Day storm in 1933, Andrew was in the early 90s, and Camille back in the 60s. 3 days later, they made landfall. But notice these tracks, an Andrew or Labor Day, a lot of our storms originate down just to the east of the Caribbean islands. It would not be a long stretch to say that one of these storms could have turned and made an impact up here in eastern North Carolina. 3 days out, they were only tropical storms, and they ended up being a really powerful hurricane. So our intensity forecast is still a challenge. So don't think just because something is a tropical storm or Category 1 storm that it can't rapidly strengthen and increase in category. So kind of keep that in mind with your planning, that you want the plans in place now so that you're not reactive when something happens. You're ready to go. You don't have to think, where should I go? What should I do? That's why you want to make your plans today, so that if something changes, you're ready to take action on those plans. So that's just a re-emphasis that you should make your plan today. Where are you going to go? Do you have multiple places you can go? If you're going to stay, do you have at least a week's worth of food, water, and medical supplies? If you have special medical conditions, really thinking about leaving. So again, need to think about that information now, well before there's a named storm, and certainly well before a storm is making an impact along our coastline. One of the best websites that we'll include in your email is the Hurricane Center. The easiest way I remember it is hurricanes.gov. They issue a tropical weather outlook 4 times a day. This is issued at 8 and 2 o'clock a.m. and p.m. And this shows the potential cyclone formation in the next 5 days. This is an old image here, but it shows a low chance is the yellow, a medium chance is the orange, and then it has named storms as well. I'm going to hop out of this presentation for a second just to show you the current, current tropical weather outlook. So hurricanes.gov, some people have it bookmarked, nhc.gov. So in the next 2 days, it defaults to 2 days. There's Paulette and another tropical storm farther out toward the Cape Verde Islands. But here's the legend down here, a 40% chance or less than that is yellow, orange is 40 to 60, and then 60 or greater is the red. So you can see we're watching an area just off the coastline of us. It has a 30% chance of turning into something over the next 48 days. By default, I kind of like clicking on the 5-day outlook to start things off, because it gives you a little bit better perspective. Not only are we watching 2 named storms already, this whole area well out to sea has a 70% chance that there'll be a 3rd storm that will form. And our area that we're watching is a 40% chance over the next 5 days. So something we're watching could have some tropical characteristics as we get into the weekend. As far as us locally, not a huge change if we get a named storm or not. Much better chance for rain the next couple of days. I'm an avid gardener, so I'm welcoming the rain. It seems like we either get a lot of rain and then nothing, then a lot of rain. So this summer has been feast or famine with the rainfall. So regardless of what happens with that, it does look like we're going to have a lot better chance for rain across our area starting today and then lasting right into the weekend. So just wanted to show you the live version of that tropical weather outlook. All this hurricane information can be found at hurricanes.gov. I would be remiss if I didn't talk about the hurricane cone, the forecast cone. I know you've seen this before, either your favorite local meteorologist on the national level, maybe a national news outlet, or you've seen it from our briefings. This represents the most probable path for just the center of the storm. You might say, well, that's kind of specific, and that is specific. 2/3 of the time, the center of the storm will go in this forecast cone. And as I mentioned, that the forecast track has improved a lot through the years. They actually make these cones at the beginning of the season based on their error, average error at 12 hours, 24, 36, and they have circles. So that cone is dependent on the statistical error based on past years. So it doesn't have anything to do with the size or speed or anything like that. So it's most likely to go inside the cone. What the cone doesn't show you are impacts. So it doesn't show you how much rain is going to fall or what's a storm surge or anything like that. The other thing to remember is I specifically said it represents the most probable path of the center, just the center. And we all know that a hurricane is not a dot on a map. If a hurricane hits Wilmington, it doesn't mean we don't have to worry about it. If it hits the Outer Banks, it doesn't mean that we don't have to worry about it. Impacts occur hundreds and hundreds of miles away. So if you get anything out of this map, remember that if you're near the cone or in the cone, you should be paying attention to it. It's not just a, hey, I'm in it, I have to worry about it. I'm out of it, I don't have to worry about it. If you're anywhere in the general vicinity of this cone, you should be paying attention. So on this map, this is Florence. Folks from northern Florida up through the Delmarva in New Jersey should be paying attention, even though they're not in the cone itself, because again, 1/3 of the time we could be wrong, and impacts can occur well away from the center itself. So please remember that. As far as preparation, there are a couple graphics that can help you with that. There's one called the earliest reasonable arrival of tropical storm force winds. This is a worst case scenario. emergency managers and core partners use this threshold to know, hey, if I have everything complete by this time, if my residents have done their plan and evacuated and done what they need to do, they're okay in this reasonable worst case scenario. So in this graphic, the earliest that Hurricane Florence could have arrived was sometime Wednesday evening on that graphic. The most likely time of arrival means when we think it's going to happen. This is from Tropical Storm Arthur this past May. This is when we do think winds will pick up. This is the window that your preparations should be done. You should be hunkering down and everything should be complete. So earliest reasonable is a worst case scenario. It's a good planning tool. When I'm working these storms, I'm at work 8, 10, 12 hours a day. And then when I come home, I have a list, get in the lawn furniture, make sure I cut the grass, make sure, the family knows where they're going if it's a situation that I have to do that. Do I have my supplies ready? Do I have enough batteries, flashlights, all that stuff should be done, led up to it, get those things out. And I want that ready by that earliest reasonable case, because that's a worst case scenario. If I'm done by then I know my family's safe. So those are things you should be thinking about now. Another thing we would be remiss without showing would be the Saffir Simpson scale. I'm sure you've heard of category 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. One thing I want you to remember is this is a wind only scale. It's a damage estimate of property damage. It has nothing to do with rainfall, storm surge, how big the storm is. There's a storm here 4 days like Florence. And raise your hand, how many times have you heard neighbors, especially neighbors that have been here for a while, that have been through Irene and Matthew and Florence and Isabel, and say, I'm not gonna leave unless it's a 3. I'm not gonna leave unless it's a 4. Keep in mind that this only shows you what the wind speed potentially could be. It says nothing about all the other impacts, and water is what is killing people. That's what we need to focus in on. In addition, no two storms are alike. I'm going to show you a comparison to Hurricane Arthur from a couple years ago and Hurricane Irene. The category scale only shows winds. It doesn't show all the impacts, and no two storms are alike. You may think you've been through a 1 or 2, but if you're on the right side of the storm, that's vastly different than the left side of the storm. So no two storms are alike. Please keep that in mind when you're thinking about evacuating. Please listen to the local officials. They know what they're doing. They have the experience in the area. So we mentioned it's not just about wind, it's about all the impacts. Since 2010, we've lost just under 200 people and had $100 billion in damage from just category 1s. We need to get away from thinking that the category is the end all be all. You remember Irene, Isaac, Sandy, Hermine, Matthew, Florence, Dorian. So, depending on where you are in Washington County or maybe where you've moved from, some of these may have had more or less impacts on you, but they were all just category 1. So that's why we're going to finish this presentation by starting off with just water, rainfall, surge, and rip currents. Then we're going to talk about wind and tornadoes, because cyclones are more than just wind. Since 1963 to 2012, 90% of deaths, direct deaths, are water related. About a third are flooding. About half were storm surge, and then surf and offshore waters causing the rest. So about 90% of people that have died directly because of cyclones through 2012 have been water related. You might say, well, Eric, it's 2020. Do you have new graphics? Yes, the last couple years, 83% have been water related. We do have some good news. The storm surge related deaths have decreased. We have some new products, storm surge watches and warnings for those we'll talk about, but we're still having a lot of issues with folks in cars. When we're talking about those deaths the last couple years, more than half of those deaths were vehicle related. It's not that you're in your home and the water comes up all of a sudden and you were caught off guard. You approach a road that has a road closed sign and you decide to go around it. You drive at night and you don't realize how much water is on the road. We as scientists are trying to do a better job at communication. We will still try to get better at forecasting, but that margin of error for improvement is narrowing. We're getting better at the rainfall forecast, the track forecast. People are still dying. Here's an example with Florence, 5 days out, the 5-day rainfall forecast, the bullseye across southeast North Carolina. and then that matches on the right is an image of what actually fell. So very, very good forecast in terms of meteorologically speaking, but we're not celebrating because 16 to 17 people that died in Florence were killed in flooding, and they were in vehicles. These are preventable deaths. Again, it's not people being caught off guard. It's going where you shouldn't go, or maybe going outside at night when you should just kind of stay home as the storm wraps up. This is an example southwest of our area in Hookerton during Matthew. You see the water, you know, if it's flowing really strong, you might know not to cross it, but if it's not, you might say, hey, I got a four-wheel drive truck, I've got those big tires, I can just cross the water. What you don't know is is that water or is that road there anymore? It might be washed out, and you can't see this at night. Very, very tragic incidents of this, and again, please respect the water. One of our biggest problems is after the storm. You know, we've hunkered down, we've done what we should do, we've evacuated, and we want to get back home. Take it easy after the storm. We have issues with carbon monoxide in generators, chainsaws, you know, people falling off ladders, and flooding, getting back on roads. So don't let your guard down once the storm has passed. Our motto with the flooding is turn around, don't drown. Some of the products we issue, you're probably familiar with flash flood warnings, but if you get a flash flood emergency on your phone or flash flood warning, if you get something on your phone that you've never gotten alerts before, we get this all the time. Where did I get this? Higher end flash flood warnings, tornado warnings, storm surge, flash flood emergencies, you know, the big stuff. If you randomly get a warning on your phone that you didn't sign up for, it means it's at an elevated level and we pushed it out to go to everybody. So if you get one of those, stay where you are, don't be going out on the roads, and be especially cautious when that happens. We mentioned the storm surge, 8 to 12 feet of surge with Florence and New Bern. And check out this video on the lower left. This is our friends and neighbors in Hyde County, Outer Banks, Ocracoke Island, 4 to 7 feet came up in 10 minutes. So storm surge is certainly a big issue. We've been very fortunate to not lose any lives the last couple of years. And a lot of that is the increased awareness of water, the power of water, and how it can come up so quickly. If we issue a storm surge watch, that means life-threatening inundation of 3 feet or greater. That is something that we do for low-lying areas near the river and sounds that are usually dry. You could see more than 3 feet of water. If it's upgraded to a warning, that means that it's imminent within the next 36 hours. On our website, on the Hurricane Center website, when we get close enough to issue forecast, we'll have a storm surge forecast from the Hurricane Center. You can zoom in. This example is showing the high-risk areas up the Trent and Neuse River near New Bern during Florence, greater than 9 feet. This is a reasonable worst-case scenario. Not everybody, thankfully, is going to see this storm surge, but somewhere in that area could see that. That's a 10% chance. That's what our emergency managers use to evacuate. So if they're telling you to get out, this is the reason that there's the chance you could have life-threatening flooding, in this case from storm surge. And from those images, you know, some folks that see it, it's just catastrophic when it happens. We're trying to message it in different ways. That zoomed in map is neat, but sometimes people may not see it. So at the 50,000 foot level, we started a new graphic with the Hurricane Center this year that kind of tells you, hey, for the Albemarle, for the Pamlico, you know, those places 4 to 6 feet, kind of a quick graphic that you can read on social media. I want to roll over now from flash flooding and storm surge to rip currents. You might say, well, Eric, I live in Washington County. I don't have to worry about rip currents. Do you go to Myrtle Beach? Do you go to the Outer Banks, maybe up toward Virginia Beach? You do have to worry about rip currents. And it doesn't always mean it's a cloudy day and it looks ominous at the beach. Last year, we had Hurricane Lorenzo, our second deadliest storm in 2019. We actually had 4 people die in our state. It was more than 2,000 miles away, but the large swell reached our ocean. It was a sunny weekend, really, really nice. And unfortunately, we had some deaths because of rip currents. So keep that in mind. If we're expecting a landfalling storm well ahead of it, the days leading up to it, folks that have spent a lot of money on their beach house, it's sunny out, the hurricane's not for a couple days, they're going to get in the water. They're going to want to go to the beach and get as much of their vacation in as possible. Remind them, if you're one of those people going with them, you have new neighbors, remind them what a rip current is. Very narrow stream of water that pulls you out. It's a break in the sandbar. You do not want to fight against it because it's like you're going against a conveyor belt of water. You want to swim left or right. It's very, very narrow. Once you're out of it, you can come back in. This is what you should be telling your neighbors. Hey, there's a high risk day when we share this on social media. Remind them of the power of rip currents. We usually lose more people because of rip currents than hurricanes. We usually lose more people in our area because of rip currents than hurricanes. So please keep that in mind. So we talked about water. One of the other threats you can get from hurricanes and tropical cyclones, of course, is the wind. With Florence, we had 80 to 100 mile per hour winds over a long period of time. When we had the rain combined with the wind over many, many days, we lost a lot of trees. This is my neighborhood where they did a lot of boarding of the houses. I'm just a couple miles from the ocean itself, and they lost a lot of shingles. So even though we were up high, we had a lot of water damage because of the shingle loss and then subsequent rainfall. Want to do a quick comparison because I certainly don't want you to think, oh, Eric said don't pay attention to the category scale. Eric wanted to emphasize with you that the category scale is only part of the puzzle. Wind is to be respected. We certainly saw that with Laura down on the Gulf Coast, some dramatic images of the wind damage that was caused by that storm. But no two storms are alike. So please pay attention to all of the impacts. Our good example with that is Arthur versus Irene. Raise your hand. Do you remember Arthur? Washington County, probably not. 20, 30, 35 mile per hour winds. It was a Category 2 storm, made landfall by Cape Lookout. It was fast moving and kind of a small storm. So they did have some surge issues and wind issues on the Outer Banks, but not a huge deal. Do you remember Irene? A lot of people do. It was a Category 1 storm. So it was not a 2, it was a 1. I'm not pulling any tricks. It made landfall by Cape Lookout, same location or similar. It was much slower moving and much, much larger. So we had wind speeds of 60, 70 miles per hour over a good chunk of the area. And then in addition, we had tremendous amounts of rain, 5 to 15 inches of rain. So again, focus on all the impacts. Category is important, but it's just part of the puzzle. There's other things like flooding, storm surge, rip currents, and of course, wind. The last threat that we can get, you might think, well, isn't that enough? It's amazing that we can get these threats. We're already dealing with a landfalling cyclone. We can get tornadoes. We've seen that with Hermine and other past storms. With Dorian, this is an example. One of the first bands of rain that came on shore produced a tornado with winds over 100 miles per hour. These can occur well away from the storm itself. So, up in Washington, you didn't have as much of an impact in Plymouth and Roper and places like that from Florence as we did down here. But look at this map. We had tornadoes near you. So again, the landfall of Florence was down by Wrightsville Beach, but you had tornadoes just to your west over toward Martin County and then down toward Beaufort and Pamlico counties. And you had tornadoes to your north and west up toward Richmond. So any landfalling system, tropical storm, hurricane, can produce tornadoes. They can produce enhanced areas of damage. But the thing I want you to remember about, go back to the, hey, I should have a plan now. If you're going to evacuate, if you're going to stay, whatever you're going to do, you need to make that action early in the game. You don't want to be leaving when those first bands are getting here saying, hey, I've got 10 more hours until the real hurricane winds pick up. Remember, those first outer bands can be dangerous with gusty winds and rain, but also the possibility of tornadoes. All right, Mr. Swindell, we're just about to wrap up here. My email is on here. It's erik.heden@noaa.gov. If we went through any of this too quick, you didn't know the links that we put up with Mr. Swindell, you don't know the Hurricane Center, no problem. I've got all of your emails that you signed up for. If you don't hear from me by tomorrow, shoot me an email. Maybe you misentered the email. I'll go exactly by how you entered it. So if there's a spelling mistake or something like that, that would be the only reason you don't get it. It does look like the recording is working out. It takes a little while to post to YouTube. We'll collect Mr. Swindell's links, our links, and then we'll send those out to you. So At this point, it's your turn. You have any questions, go ahead and ask those. I will look at the questions here, see if we've got any, and then I'll call on folks that have any. So at this point, I don't see any yet, which is okay. And then we'll look at the attendees, Mr. Swindell. And again, you can raise your hand if you have any questions. So I don't see any yet, but that happens usually. We just need one person to ask, Mr. Lance, and then they start rolling in. So I'm going to use this chance to show our website again, weather.gov/MHX or Morehead City. If you go to the hurricane preparedness page, again, you're going to have these links. It is set up like the Hurricane Awareness Week back in May. So determining your risk is one of the days. Evacuation plan. I mentioned the Know Your Zone campaign from the North Carolina Emergency Management. That's there. So it's a whole separate website that talks about Know Your Zone. You can zoom into Washington County. You can see what zone you're in, all that information. Storm surge. If I didn't explain it enough, this shows you what storm surge is. What does that mean? 6 to 9 feet. I'm about 6 feet tall. If they're saying water is above my head, that's a big deal. Some of the other days we talked about disaster kits. What should you have in those kits? On day 4, we talk about insurance checkup. That's something you do now, weeks and months in advance. You don't want to wait until the storm is here, because a lot of times it's too late. The insurance won't be in effect. Strengthening your home. Little things you can do around your house. I have this old shed that I always have to nail shut. I'll probably still nail it shut, but I hadn't gotten around to fixing the lock that was messed up in Florence. I finally got around to fixing it, because I said, if I'm preaching, if I want people to listen to me, I got to do what I'm saying as well. So I got my lock all fixed. I'm tidying up the yard so that as we get closer, I don't have to worry about it as much. Rip currents, we went over those. Helping your neighbor. Washington County has done a great job with this. You are all a team. You're all a community. And you can help each other by sharing this information. Share this with one person. You're going to get an email from me. All you got to do is forward it on. All you have to do is put it on Facebook. There's a lot of noise out there, and you can't control that, but you can control what you have control over. And sharing good information is something that you have control over. And then day 7, having a written plan. That's always a good idea, whether you're saving money or you have goals on a diet, whatever you have. If you've got it written down, it's usually more likely that it's going to go well for you. So I'm going to hop back in here and see if we got any questions. And again, you can just ask it through the webinar itself. If you'd rather ask a verbal question, just raise your hand and I will call on you and then unmute your mic. Mr. Swindell, we might get off lucky this time. We've got a quiet audience. That's okay.
Must have done a good job of getting information to them.
So I'll let you say a wrap up, Mr. Swindell, and then I'll totally wrap up if we don't have anything else.
I just want to thank everybody for joining in and listening to what Erik had to say, and I sure thank him for lending a hand out and saying that he had this available. I'm glad we could do it, and I know everybody in the county that's joined in is glad that we've done something like this. I really appreciate it. I know in the past when Miss Ann did it, we would do it here, or we would gather up at the Vernon James Center and have everybody funnel in, and that was nice, but maybe we'll be able to get back to it sooner rather than later. But this year is not the year. So I just thank everybody for joining in. And if you have any questions that may not be directly related to any of the information that Erik presented, anything for me, any concerns, call here to our office. We'll answer the questions or do the best we can, and we'll find the answer. So we just thank everybody.
That's perfect. And I think we're going to get off the hook, Mr. Swindell, because I don't see any questions. So we also want to thank you all for having us. We love coming up there. We'll see you again in person. For now, we'll just keep doing these. You'll see us in the wintertime as well as we do winter classes for winter weather awareness. If you need anything from us, reach out, and then be checking your email later today or tomorrow. We'll have all those links that Mr. Swindell talked about I talked about along with the recording itself. So appreciate it. Have a great day, everybody. And again, please share this information with your neighbors. It definitely is something to share. Have a great day.